It's time we have an honest conversation about drafting Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty in the first round for the New Orleans Saints. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, it's Mock Draft Monday, so we're doing another 4-round mock draft, 6 picks, and I'll give you alternate picks and who I would have taken if they were still on the board. So a jam-packed episode getting you introduced to a bunch of different prospects. In this one, we're going to take a look at how the New Orleans Saints desperately need to boost their depth, some examples of how they can do that in the middle rounds of this year's draft, why they should be addressing the trenches in day 2 and how they can get it done, and why the New Orleans Saints should sprint to the podium for Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty if he's available at number 9 overall in the first round, unless one other prospect is on the board. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs wants to help you find the candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. So head over to linkedin.com/NFL to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply. Under almost every single circumstance in this year's 2025 NFL draft, if Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty is on the board when the New Orleans Saints go up to select at number 9 overall, that is exactly the name that should be on their card, and that is exactly who they should be taking. No doubts about it, no hesitation, full stop, that's it. What do the New Orleans Saints need on offense? Bigger than anything else or more than anything else? Probably continuing to work on their offensive line, but you can still do that in free agency as well as later on in the draft. But the New Orleans Saints need a threat on offense. Did you see the way that the New Orleans Saints offense was able to open up when Rashid Shaheed was on the field and the Saints had a threat deep? Did you see the way that the New Orleans Saints were able to operate their offense when Alvin Kamara was early in the season, the offensive line was healthy, and there was a threat in the backfield? That is what Ashton Jeanty gives you for the foreseeable future. So if the New Orleans Saints are sitting there at pick number 9 and Jeanty is on the board, I'm sprinting, if I'm the New Orleans Saints, to go and turn in my card. And I'm telling Roger Goodell he better sprint to the podium for me as well to read this dang thing before anybody comes up with any kind of funny business. Not risking that at all. I'm drafting Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty. I'll tell you why here in a moment. But here's my exception. I have 2 exceptions, really. One exception is realistic. The other exception currently doesn't exist. My one exception is if Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona, is on the board. I might consider Abdul Carter, the edge rusher out of Penn State, because I think the Saints need a speed rusher, but that edge group is really deep. Running back group's really deep too, but there's a drop-off between Jeanty and the rest of the field, right? So my one exception is Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona, who for me is the number 1 prospect in terms of fit, need, talent, best player available, all that for the New Orleans Saints in terms of what it is that they need, right? Different teams need different positions, all those other things. So that's my one exception. If Tetairoa McMillan's on the board, then I'm going with him. The other exception, which doesn't exist as a possibility right now, is if Penn State quarterback Drew Aller goes back into the NFL draft. You've heard me say over and over again that I do not like this quarterback class, period, full stop, no hesitation, just like how I would run that pickup for Ashton Jeanty. But one of the reasons why I don't like this quarterback class is because Drew Aller decided to say that he's going back to school in 2025 at Penn State. So behind Shedeur Sanders, for me, the rest of that quarterback field is I'm fine with it. I'd avoid it, build around the quarterback position, and then try to get, a future, try to really develop that future with Spencer Rattler, try to develop, that 2025 with Derek Carr, whatever it is that you're going to get with these quarterbacks, try to get the best out of it by getting the best players around the Ashton Jeanty, Tetairoa McMillan, players like that. Obviously, you're not getting both of those guys, but get who you can. But if Drew Aller is on the board and decides after a strong playoff that he wants to flip and declare for the NFL draft, I might consider him at number 9 or potentially even trading up for him if I have to, because that's a game changer for sure. All right, let's take a look at why I would take Ashton Jeanty. So first of all, game changer is the word. 5'9", 215 pounds. Listen to these numbers. I'm going to tell you some numbers that are absolutely ridiculous in terms of production. Now, I want a caveat level of play, but there have been a lot of Boise State running backs, and there have been a lot of Mountain West running backs. There's been a lot of those second division, group of five. Like, there's been those running backs for a long time. They've all been around for a while. Ashton Jeanty's numbers are historic. 2,595 rushing yards with 29 rushing touchdowns. 2,595 rushing yards is ridiculous. 29 rushing touchdowns is ridiculous-er. Like, that's absolutely insane. He also had 1 receiving touchdown in 2024, but back in 2023, he racked up 578 receiving yards. So you can see a little bit of the receiving prowess there. Number 1 in the nation in missed tackles forced with 151, yards after contact with 1,970, and 15 or more yard runs, 36. Number 1 in the nation across the board in all 3 of those metrics. Zone run, man run, receiving, absolute game changer, absolute game breaker. Look at the other NFC South teams. Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders over in Carolina. Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson over in Atlanta. Bucky Irving in Tampa. How they have changed the game for those quarterbacks, for those players. Some more successfully than others, Bucky Irving and all that. But look at Jahmyr Gibbs, the guy that I said should have been drafted in the first round back a couple years ago, ended up being drafted in the first round, 12th overall by the Detroit Lions. Everyone laughed at Detroit, and watch Jahmyr Gibbs run. In the most important game of the season, one of the biggest games in NFL history, 14-2, who was the difference? The running back, who totaled 4 touchdowns on Sunday Night Football between the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings. And by the way, Aaron Glenn put on an absolute clinic, limiting one of the best offenses in the NFL to just 9 points and 262 total yards. New Orleans Saints are expected to interview him. Shocker. But I think Aaron Glenn put himself even further on the map after that performance last night on Sunday Night Football. So Jeanty, huge. Great. Running to the podium if he's there. Here were the other players that were on the board at the same time that I made that selection. LSU offensive tackle Will Campbell. Look, Saints are probably going to be good at tackle. They're going to feel really good about Taliesin Fuang as well as Trevor Penning, the only 2 offensive linemen to start all 17 games for this team. You could move Campbell to guard, but I'm not spending a 9th overall selection on an interior offensive lineman. He's got short arms. He's probably moving to guard in the NFL. Georgia linebacker Jalen Walker, 6'2", 245 pounds, could be the speed rusher off the edge, would be a little bit of an evolution of the New Orleans Saints defensive system, but it's an evolution that they desperately need. So he's somebody I would keep an eye out on as well. The player that I would have drafted if he were on the board instead of who I did take, Arizona wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan, just like I mentioned. The New Orleans Saints need a game breaker. McMillan and Jeanty are the 2 top names in that category that are realistic for New Orleans. Travis Hunter, of course, is another big one there. But this is the way that I look at it for New Orleans. If you can walk away in that first round with Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona, or the Boise State running back in Ashton Jeanty, you can win the rest of your draft by simply building your trenches and filling out depth. And I'm going to show you exactly how that works here as we continue our Mock Draft Monday here on Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. A lot of people looking for jobs this offseason in the NFL. We're already seeing interviews for the New Orleans Saints. They're wanting to talk with Aaron Glenn. They're wanting to talk with several other people around the NFL, all this other stuff. That is going to continue. And if you are somebody that's also looking to fill your job role, look for interviews, don't worry about going to social media. Don't worry about going to the NFL teams. Go to LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs will get you all taken care of. 72% of small businesses say that they have been given highly qualified candidates, not just candidates. Highly qualified candidates, thanks to LinkedIn Jobs, who can go ahead and get you the best candidates available utilizing data that you won't get anywhere else. So go and post your job for free today at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Get access to those best candidates available out there. It's what LinkedIn does. It's what they do best, and it's what they do better than anybody else. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode of Locked On Saints also brought to you by our friends over at Rocket Money. I talk all the time about how Rocket Money has saved me money. How did they do it? Well, they helped me get rid of some of those unwanted subscriptions that I kind of forgot about. And listen, I'm a man of great pride, great hubris, unfortunately. And as a part of that, I didn't think that I had any of those subscriptions that I completely forgot about and all of those other things. And so because of that, I put this off for a long time. And then eventually somebody convinced me. They were like, no, do it. You probably have them. It happens to everybody. It's okay. I checked it out and they were right. Rocket Money saved me some of my monthly expenses with some unwanted subscriptions that they found for me. They also have some really cool features like the goals tab, which is one of my favorites, where they also will take some money and put it aside from you so you don't have to worry about the stress of monthly budgeting. So they'll help you budget your money every month and they'll help you save some of those monthly expenses that have been coming out that you've forgotten about. So go and check them out today. Get rid of those unwanted subscriptions and get those financial goals set and achieved even faster by using Rocket Money. Just head over to rocketmoney.com/locked on. All right, family, if the New Orleans Saints can get a playmaker in round one, I have good news for you. The draft is more than just one round, which means they can still continue to build up their trenches and do so successfully with some of their day two selections. Let's take a look at rounds 2 and 3. So we're going to go through 3 prospects here that are drafted. I'm going to give you 2 prospects at each pick that were also on the board. And I'm going to give you an alternative pick for each one that I would have taken had they still been on the board as well. Let's start off round 2, pick 40, which is where the New Orleans Saints pick is projected. Remember, this is going to change a little bit starting in round 3 because of, or starting in round 4 rather, because of, compensatory picks and all other stuff that will extend the end of the 3rd round. But here in round 2, pick 40, I went with Ohio State defensive end Jack Sawyer. Getting back on the Ohio State train here, 6'5", 240 pounds. So he represents a little bit, actually 260 pounds. Sorry, that's a typo, 260 pounds. But he represents a little bit of a middle range of the big towering, as one of our insiders, Locked On Insiders calls it, Jolly Green Giants. And then looking as well at maybe a shift towards a little bit more of a speedier, win with bend kind of an edge rusher. He gives you a little bit of both. His 18.8 pass rush win percentage is number 6 amongst the 86 different Power 4 defensive ends with at least 300 pass rush snaps in 2024. So bottom line, very good in terms of that. 11 sacks in 2024 as well. 13 hits on the quarterback. Sorry, not 11 sacks, 8 sacks. 13 hits on the quarterback, 8 sacks, and then also 8 tackles for a loss in 2024. 22 career sacks over the course of his time with the Ohio State Buckeyes. So I think you're still going to want to invest in run defense in addition to Sawyer, but if you want somebody to come in as a young, talented pass rusher that represents a little bit of a blend of power, speed, and all those things, getting a little bit smaller on that side, you can do that with a guy like Jack Sawyer. And don't worry, I'm also going to lean into the speedy win with Ben edge rusher later on in this draft. A couple of other players that were intriguing that were on the board at the time: Alabama linebacker Jahad Campbell, prototypical linebacker at 6'3", 244 pounds. Great size for a guy like that. Really good blend of coverage and run stopping at the second level as well. And then I also was very tempted by Iowa State cornerback Darian Porter. Darian Porter, big cornerback at 6'4", 200 pounds, 4.7 passer rating allowed in 2024. I had to look that metric up a couple different times at a couple different places, but yeah, he was that good during 2024. Absolutely insane. 3 interceptions during that season. Only surrendered 2 career touchdowns over the course of his last 3 years. A 29.4 completion completion percentage when targeted. I was very close to taking Darian Porter out of Iowa State. Definitely a name to watch. Who would I have taken if they were on the board instead of Jack Sawyer? Probably South Carolina defensive tackle TJ Sanders. Big run stopper, but I would actually call him more of a hybrid defensive tackle. Like, he's a big enough body that you can add some to his frame. 6'4", but just 290 pounds right now. You can bulk them up very easily at 6'4". Disruptive in both the pass rush and in the run defense. So he represents a little bit more of a hybrid defensive tackle that you can move around and present some athletic mismatches. Helps you kind of build on a little bit of the Brian Brzee type, but a little bit more in the run game when it comes to TJ Sanders. But very happy with my selection of Jack Sawyer to kick off the second round. Now let's kick off the third round. I was able to go back. Remember, the focus is building the trenches here. Round 3, pick 71, Kentucky defensive tackle Deon Walker. One of my favorite prospects in this year's draft as somebody that could really help the New Orleans Saints immediately. 6'6", 345 pounds. I said it in yesterday's episode. I'll say it again. This dude looks like he has been eating that down-home Kentucky food from before he was born. Big-bodied run plugger in the middle. 7.5 sacks, though, in 2023. So he showed you a little bit of what he could do back then. Came back to just 1.5 sacks in 2024, but played a little bit more of an A-gap run stopper role in 2024. So it wasn't like a lack of production. It's just the role changed in terms of what he was being asked to do. Gives you that run-stopping presence that you still need after taking a guy like Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. I can't get those right. Every time I've gone to say Iowa State today, I've said Ohio State. Every time I've gone to say Iowa State, I've said Ohio State. I just did it again. So it doesn't matter. I'm just going to move on. I don't have to say those anymore for the rest of the show. That was very embarrassing. We're moving on. So good, great run blocker, guy that gives you a little bit of help there. A couple other guys that were really intriguing that were on the board here. Arizona State running back Cam Skattebo is still on the board at this point. Skattebo is somebody that I really like. Explosive, rising name, 1,700 rushing yards this season, 21 rushing touchdowns, almost as ridiculous as Ashton Jeanty, but not quite much. But both of these guys extremely explosive. So maybe had I gone with Tetairoa McMillan in the first round, if he was on the board, like had I had the opportunity to go with Tetairoa McMillan and then been able to turn around in the third round and take Cam Skattebo, I would have been very, very happy with that. 52 receptions, has experience with the Sun Devils, so he knows the zone scheme. He's a good scheme fit for New Orleans because you can expect that even if they do make a change at offensive coordinator or their offensive play caller, that it's still going to be a wide zone heavy offense and they're still going to want to throw to running backs out of the backfield. So at 5'11", 215 pounds, great size for the position, good versatility in terms of his role as well. And then I was really tempted by LSU cornerback Zy Alexander. I know he's an LSU Tiger, but 6'2", 194 pounds, solid cover corner, allowing only a 54.5 passer rating when targeted and a 43.5% completion rate when targeted in 2024 as well, and brings you additional value as a returner on special teams. I think you got to see that up against Baylor just this past weekend. The player that I would have drafted that wasn't on the board, this is more of I would have considered drafting if they were on the board, was William and Mary offensive lineman Charles Grant. Listed at tackle, but at 6'4", 300 pounds, you're moving him inside on the interior in the NFL. 3 sacks allowed over the course of his entire career, no more than 8 hurries in a single season, and has a ton of experience as a zone blocker. But remember those categories. 3 sacks in his career, no more than 8 pressures in a single season or 8 hurries allowed in a single season, and experience as a zone blocker. Because as we move now to round 3, pick 90, and I take Texas A&M offensive lineman Armaj Reed Adams, listen to these numbers. No more than 8 hurries surrendered in a single season, only 3 sacks allowed in his career, and is versatile in terms of his experience in both the zone run and in the gap run game. So I was basically able to not have to take Charles Grant because I was able to come back here to Armaj Reed Adams at 6'5", 330 pounds. You basically just got a bigger version of Grant that played tougher competition. So I'm glad that I didn't have Charles Grant on the board to distract me from this opportunity. Has played 12 games all 3 years, Reed Adams has, and has versatility in terms of his experience at both right guard, left guard, and right tackle. I'm starting him at left guard. pretty much immediately. Colorado wide receiver Torrey Horton was a little intriguing here. 6'3", 185 pounds, just a little bit too light, and spent most of 2024 injured due to a knee injury that required season-ending surgery, so I'm okay on that right now. And then UCF running back RJ Harvey, really deep running back class here. Talented back, compact frame at 5'9", 208 pounds. Very, very effective zone runner. Number 25 in the nation in zone run attempts, 32 carries of 15 plus yards. Number 2 behind only Jeanty, who had 36. And then over 1,400 rushing yards in each of the last 2 seasons. Those are pretty solid ones as well. But the player that I would have drafted if he was still on the board for this pick, I might have considered Miami edge rusher Tyler Barron, or Taylor Barron, 5.5 sacks in 2024. Is also a proven to be a very good pass rusher and run stopper. So he fits the edge defender mold that the New Orleans Saints like so much. That's typical for New Orleans. 6'5", 260 pounds, kind of hits that blend of big body and speed rusher around the edge as well. So a couple of good options in terms of all that. So that gives us our trenches in terms of what we could look at the end of day 2 or throughout day 2. Now let's get to our final round in pick 4, where it's all about boosting depth. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are on the way. You got some great matchups. The Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers are meeting for the 3rd time this season. You can get in on that. You can get in on some of that Houston action. There's a ton going on all around the NFL playoffs. And if you want to capitalize on it, FanDuel is the place to go. Everything from live betting to player props, spreads, lines, over-unders, all that you can find every single day. And not just with the NFL, but with the NBA and much more all around the world of sports. You can get in on all that. You can even look ahead to the NFL draft, a whole bunch. But if you're a new customer, what I would recommend is finding a heavy favorite and just betting the money line on that heavy favorite with your first bet. You do that, you put $5 down as your first bet. If you win that, you'll win $250 in bonus bets in addition to the winnings that you bring home, as long as you win that first $5 bet. You can get started today at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up our 4-round mock draft by building up some depth here in the 4th round. Just as a recap, here's our draft so far. In the 1st round, pick 9, we went with running back Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. We then went with Ohio State defensive end Jack Sawyer in the 2nd round, pick 40. And then both of our picks in round 3 went to big guys in the middle. Over on the defensive side, Kentucky defensive tackle Deion Walker. Over on the offensive side, Armaj Reed Adams, the guard out of Texas A&M. I'm going to continue to build the trenches just a little bit more because, look, the board was a little slim here at round 4, pick 111. Some injured players, things like that. Some quarterbacks maybe you can roll the dice on, but the player that I wanted wasn't necessarily there. So instead, I went with Oregon offensive tackle Ajani Cornelius. This is somebody that I do really like, though. 6'5", 315 pounds. He's been a career right tackle. He could back up pinning, but also has enough in terms of size to have that versatility to move around a bit. Lots of scheme versatility as well, playing in Oregon. Very familiar with moving pockets, designed rollouts, zone runs, all those other things that New Orleans is liking doing right now. So he fits that scheme. And of course, he fits the outside zone run game as well. Just 3 sacks allowed in the last 3 years. So he has been effective in protection, has a lot of experience, all that. A couple players that were on the board that were tempting, but I didn't go with. Michigan safety Rod Moore. Look, really good sized, deep safety, but didn't take a single snap in 2024. Kind of had to play a coach on the sideline, player coach role this year due to injury. If he goes back to school in 2025, that could make him even more desirable in 2026 because he's kind of had that like coach on the sideline kind of experience. NFL teams love that. But for right now, I'm not going down the injured player that missed an entire year route. The other player that was A little bit tempting was Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. Look, I'm not personally a fan of this quarterback class outside of Shedeur Sanders, and especially after Drew Aller ended up going back to school or declaring that he goes back to school. If he ends up declaring for the NFL draft anyway after a good playoff, then I'm all about Aller all day. But for right now, he's not a part of this class. So if you're looking at somebody else to maybe draft and develop, Beck has some good signs, great size. First of all, for a quarterback, 6'4", 220 pounds, really, really good. So if you're looking for a developmental guy, Beck's a really good option. A little bit of a game manager type, an efficient passer. 2024 was worse than 2023, so kind of went the wrong direction there, but still good developmental player there. But that 2024 not being as good as 2023 is typically a red flag when it comes to quarterbacks. You want to see these guys get better every year. That wasn't the case for Carson Beck, although he was dealing with injury and stuff like that. That has kind of taken him out here towards the end of the season. Now, for the player that I would have drafted if he was on the board, this is where I would have gone with the win with bend, speed rusher around the edge player, Michigan edge rusher, Josiah Stewart. It's time that the New Orleans Saints update their pass rusher prototype, and I think that Stewart's a really, really great mid-round player to help them do that. At 6'1", 245 pounds, a lot of people would turn their nose up at this guy, but think about Zach Bond and what Zach Bond ended up bringing, the way that he's played, all those other things. Stewart's built like a linebacker, but his 27.1 pass rush win rate and effectiveness in the run game are super, super hard not to be tantalized by and tempted by. There's no doubt about that. If the Saints are looking for somebody that can win with bend, then Stewart is about as good a stand-up pass rusher as you're going to find in this year's draft at this point. Absolutely worth taking a shot here. 8.5 sacks this year, 5.5 sacks last year, 2.5 sacks the year before that, trending in the right direction, and would be somebody that would represent a pretty solid indication of change on that New Orleans Saints defense's approach. Could still drop back in coverage for you, could still play a little bit of that, be that on-ball linebacker, though, I think is where he would really, really excel. Let him be that run stopper guy from the second level, as being that sort of like second level run defender, while also giving you just a flashy, skilled, speedy pass rusher off the edge. Josiah Stewart is a guy that I'm going to try to work into more and more mock drafts, but I'm really excited to see how his draft process goes, because I think he'll continue to rise. Round 4, pick 127 to finish us up here. Syracuse tight end Oronde Gadsden the second, 6'5", 236 pounds. You can probably bulk up there, but at 6'5", you can definitely add some weight. You got the frame for it. Over 100 targets in 2024, 74 receptions for 934 receiving yards and 7 touchdown receptions. You're probably going, why haven't I heard about this guy? Because he went to Syracuse, right? And so Syracuse isn't going to get a lot of that love. But look, he's also a very solid run blocker. Why? Because he went to Syracuse. And that's the game in Syracuse. You have to be a good blocker at almost every position. Wide receiver, tight end, you got to be a good blocker in the backfield as well. But this team loves to run the football. So when you have a guy that plays for a team that loves to run the football, and he's playing at tight end, but he's still catching 934 receiving yards, 74 passes, and 7 touchdowns. Yeah, it kind of means something. Number 5 in the nation when it comes to deep yards in 2024, averaged 12.8 yards per reception and had a 1.93 yard per route run total. Really, really solid production there for the young guy. 16 contested catches as well, which is number 2 in the nation at tight end. So that's definitely somebody that I am willing to roll the dice on and look at to add some more developmental depth to that tight end room, which I do think needs to be addressed over the course of this offseason. The other players that were on the board that were really tempting, Notre Dame linebacker Jack Kaiser. I honestly would have been perfectly happy drafting him. I wanted to highlight Oronde in this episode, but look, strongly considered this guy. 6th year team captain. Right? 63 games played in his total career at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's been around for a really long time. Don't know if you know that, but Notre Dame's been around for a really long time. He holds now the all-time record for most games played in Fighting Irish history all time with 63. And he's gonna have another one by the time that it's all said and done. 6'2", 231 pounds, a little small, but still pretty good size that holds true for the linebacker position. And as long as that size actually holds up through the combine, doesn't miss tackles though. Despite that size, 3.5% missed tackle rate in 2024. It's absolutely outstanding. Great second level run defender. Would strongly consider him at this spot and taking him here outright. No issue with that at all. The other name that I'll bring up is Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers. Again, not very high on the vast majority of the quarterbacks in this class, but some people really like Quinn Ewers, so I wanted to highlight him here. Biggest concern for me is the highlight of his inefficiencies in the short and intermediate game being kind of clouded over by the beauty of the deep ball. Really efficient downfield, not very efficient in the short and intermediate areas, but the deep ball is the thing that's going to get him the clips. It's going to get his social media content shared and all that kind of stuff. He's going to look great at the combine because of that, but Ewers, if he declares, maybe he goes back or transfers because they want to get to Arch Manning over in Austin as quickly as possible. But if he declares for the draft, somebody to look at. I don't know, not one of my favorites, but at 6'2", 210 pounds, not the ideal size for the NFL, but more than good enough. Completed 66.4% of his passes so far in 2024. And of course, Texas plays on. Finally, the player that I would have drafted if they were on the board here, honestly, very happy with my selection of Oronde Gadsden. Could have been perfectly happy with Jack Kaiser as well. But I would have definitely considered Miami's Simeon Barrow Jr. Doubling up at defensive tackle. Barrow's just more of an interior rusher than Deion Walker is, so you get a little bit of a compliment there. 6'3", 290 pounds. He's a little bit more Brian Brzee-like, but not nearly like as productive as Brian Brzee was in college and everything, or not nearly as highly rated as he was going into college and everything, but definitely would have been somebody that I would have considered. So that wraps up this 4-round mock draft. Wow, that was fast. So Ashton Jeanty to start us off, the running back out of Boise State. Ohio State defensive end Jack Sawyer. We went Deion Walker out of Kentucky at defensive tackle. Armaj Reed Adams, Texas A&M. Ajani Cornelius out of Oregon at offensive tackle, and then wrapped up with Oronde Gadsden, the tight end out of Syracuse. But you also heard some of the other names that were on the list. So what would you do differently? You heard the players that weren't on the board, all that. Would love to hear from you in terms of what you think as well. Coming up tomorrow, Black Monday is already underway. More head coaching openings are open around the NFL, and the New Orleans Saints are already expected to call up Aaron Glenn, as we all already expected. So we'll have that. We got locker room cleanup today at the Saints facility, so I have some more information from you on that tomorrow as well, and much more coming up for you here on Locked On Saints, as we are still here every single Monday through Friday. That will not change over the course of the offseason, and I might still continue to go 7 days a week just for funsies. So appreciate you, as always, for making us your first listen. Go and check out Locked On NFL, and I thank you for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.